Hello, my horror-loving dudes. I'm Killjoy Jake, and today we're going to be talking about Radio Silence's next big movie. As of right now, there is no confirmation that they will be directing or even be a part of Scream 7. But we do know that they're working on a Universal monster movie with Melissa Barrera that we're going to talk about right now.
Well, sometimes that is better.
So like I was just saying seconds ago, Radio Silence's next movie is going to be a Universal monster flick starring Melissa Barrera. You probably know her from the last two Scream movies. She was the star of them. Now, as of right now, Radio Silence is trying to keep it under wraps as to what kind of Universal monster movie they're working on, but old Jakey here might have found something that indicates that this is going to be a Dracula's Daughter reboot. According to Production Weekly, the working title for the film is Abducting Abigail. The film is being described as the thriller follows a young girl, Abigail, who is abducted from her Boston brownstone in order to get ransom from her wealthy but shadowy father. What seems like an easy kidnapping job, of course, turns out to be far more to deal with than her captors could have imagined. And as you can see at the bottom there, it says AKA Dracula's Daughter. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the UCM, or the Universal Classic Monsters, which is technically like the universe title, I guess, there was a film all the way back in 1936 titled Dracula's Daughter, and it was kinda not so big of a hit. But it seems like an interesting story and one that definitely needs a reboot. Now, the big question that Radio Silence and many of the other directors who have tackled big projects such as Renfield or Leigh Whannell's Invisible Man, they've been asked, will this all be one interconnected universe? Now, the reason this question keeps getting brought up is technically the Universal Classic Monsters were kind of the pioneer of the whole cinematic universe idea. Now, technically the first crossover film in the Universal Classic Monsters movies was Son of Frankenstein, where Bela Lugosi played Igor, and then we had, of course, Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. This got people thinking, like, well, what if we did both of these monsters but in the same movie together? That would be pretty crazy. That, of course, spawned 1943's first technical crossover movie, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. They would go on to do a bunch of crossover films like that, even featuring Abbott and Costello in many of them, like way too many of them. Now, we could talk about Universal Classic Monster history all day, but I'm gonna save that for another video. A big reason everyone is speculating this about some of the newer films like I was talking about before, Invisible Man from 2020, Renfield, and now this Dracula's Daughter movie. Why everyone thinks it's going to be this interconnected universe is, well, everyone is doing it nowadays. The biggest example is, of course, the MCU, but then we have things like the DCEU, and even John Wick is becoming an interconnected universe, with films like Ballerina coming out, and also the series The Continental, which will feature the hotel from the overarching story that we know so far, but in the past. It's funny how we went from the UCM to the MCU. Very full circle moment there in movie history. So will this all kind of kick off some kind of interconnected universe where Elizabeth Moss and like Nicholas Hoult are all coming together? Probably not. Talking about their upcoming film, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin says, "We're out here right now, we're in Dublin. We're hopefully starting to shoot in a few weeks. It's very fast. It's a Universal monster movie, and that, for us, is insane that we're making a Universal monster movie. We are, as the guys who brought you Scream 5 and 6, very much fans of original standalone movies. Kids of the 80s and 90s, we miss that. Obviously, that's not really where the world is right now, especially with studio movies, and that's fine, because there's other ways to do that. And I think our approach is always, it sounds weird, but that's our approach on Scream 5 and Scream 6. And that's our approach on this one. Let's make this original movie. It's a standalone movie. There is a monster in it. It's Universal doing their thing, where they're giving different filmmakers, here, take this and run with it. That for us is exciting as filmmakers to be going into making this movie. It's also really exciting to watch other filmmakers put their stamp on something we know from growing up. This is music to my ears, because like I was just saying a minute ago, everything is an interconnected universe these days, and I long for the days when we just had little self-contained stories and that was it. Maybe you got a sequel, but that was it. That's the story. And that's okay. Not everything has to be this gigantic story spanning across 50 movies where if you miss one of them, you don't know what the hell's going on in the next one. Kind of a big detriment for the MCU right now, on top of it just not feeling very creative. It just feels like the same thing every single time, even though we're following completely different characters in every movie. It's the same brand of humor. The same thing happens. Big CGI fight at the end of the movie. So this is really refreshing that Universal is doing this with their classic properties. They're not just trying to make it one big interconnected universe, they're just letting filmmakers do whatever they want with these properties. Like, think about Renfield and Invisible Man. Like, those two movies are incredibly different. Leigh Whannell took more of a modern horror approach to his Invisible Man movie, where Renfield felt more of like a horror comedy. And that's nice. It's a variety in tone, even though they're kind of connected in a weird sort of way. I don't really need a movie where Renfield and Elizabeth Moss's character team up for some kind of big battle or something. We don't need that. We don't need that movie. If someone from Universal is watching this, please don't make that movie. But discussing this new take on Dracula's daughter, as we just learned from the plot description there, it's going to be kind of a home invasion thriller, which I find very fascinating. Knowing Radio Silence, this film I feel like is going to feel a little more like Devil's Due and probably Ready or Not mixed together. You're gonna have the sci-fi elements that you got in Devil's Due, kind of mixed with the more like home invasion thrillery vibe that Ready or Not has. Obviously, Ready or Not is not your typical home invasion movie, but it does feature characters in a house and they're getting killed. And Melissa Barrera will assumably be playing Abigail, who's Dracula's daughter. Now, I'm especially hyped to see Melissa Barrera as a vampire biting some people's necks out. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the last two Scream movies, they've been kind of setting up Sam Carpenter, who is Melissa Barrera's character, as kind of being a Ghostface maybe in a future movie. They've been teasing it in the last two films, and it might actually happen in 7, whenever that happens. So this movie could almost serve as an appetizer to that, seeing Melissa Barrera just rip people's necks out, sucking their blood. I'm so down to see that. I will pay so much money to see that film. And then hopefully in Scream 7, she goes Ghostface and starts stabbing people in the neck. I mean, it's gonna be a killer double feature, that much is for sure. I'm really hyped for that movie, but I know a lot of Scream fans out there are concerned for the future of that franchise, which I do want to touch on a little bit here at the end. Will Scream 7 be affected by this upcoming project, as well as some of other Radio Silence movies that are in the works as of right now? Well, here's the thing. Radio Silence is very busy right now. They have a lot on their plate. Not only are they doing this Dracula's Daughter movie, but they've also been signed on to direct 3 Escape from New York requel films. While I am very hyped for all of those things I just talked about, it is kind of sounding like the last nail in the coffin for Radio Silence for the Scream franchise. But here's the thing. Going back to an article from kind of a long time ago now, Radio Silence talked about how they were kind of indifferent to doing a sequel to Scream 5 in the first place, and if you remember the end of that movie, it feels very definite, it feels very final. It doesn't seem like they needed a continuation to that film. I'm very glad we got Scream 6, because as of right now, it's my favorite sequel in that franchise, and it's a ton of fun if you haven't seen it yet. But I do get why they were skeptical on making another one of those. It's a lot of work. A lot has to go into the writing process, the directing, everything has to be kind of perfect in a murder mystery or you're gonna mess something up. It's probably a lot tougher to make a movie like a Scream sequel where it's one long story, you know, something I've been talking about getting away from, opposed to something like Dracula's Daughter, where it's just a standalone film, anything can happen, you make up the rules. You can't really change the rules too much in Scream. There's some things that you have to do in that screenplay, and that can be restrictive at times. I understand that, I sympathize with that. And like I was just saying a moment ago, Matt Bettinelli Open was praising Universal for letting them have some creative freedom with some of their already established properties. I really do love what they did with the Scream franchise, but I think I am excited to see someone else tackle it now moving forward. Rumor has it that Christopher Landon, who directed Happy Death Day, the sequel to that, and also Freaky from 2020, may direct the next installment of the Scream franchise. But as of right now, nothing is confirmed. But what do you think about Radio Silence doing a new take on Dracula's Daughter? Are you excited for this film, or would you rather them be working on Scream 7? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this brand new video on Radio Silence's next movie. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see this channel grow, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.